What if owning the world's most advanced fighter jet required you to hand over the keys to your own national defense? For Canada, this isn't a hypothetical exercise. It is the multi-billion-dollar question at the very heart of our strategic future. To navigate this, we need a framework that moves beyond simple performance metrics, and that is what we will build together. Until very recently, the path forward seemed preordained. The replacement of Canada's aging CF-18 fleet with 88 new F-35 jets was framed within our defense establishment as a decision that was all but procedural, almost inevitable. This sense of inevitability wasn't arbitrary. It's rooted in the very architecture of Canada's security posture. Beneath the surface, this assumption is the logical output of decades of deep structural military integration with the United States and our NATO allies. Within the integrated command of NORAD, interoperability isn't just a convenient feature. It is the foundational principle. Therefore, selecting the F-35 was never really a standalone procurement debate. It was the natural continuation of a strategic alignment established long ago, making the most interoperable option the default path. This entire conversation, which many believed was finally settled, rested on that quiet assumption of continuity. But what happens when that default path is suddenly and profoundly challenged? When an alternative emerges that doesn't just question the choice of aircraft, but the very philosophy of integration we have long taken for granted? That alternative was Sweden's Saab Gripen, and its arrival transformed what looked like a simple procurement into a profound strategic debate. Because beneath the surface, the real conversation was never truly about which jet could turn faster or climb higher. The real tension lies in a single critical question: control. To understand this, let's use an analogy. The F-35 is like the most advanced iPhone you can buy. It's incredibly powerful, integrated into a seamless global network, but you are fundamentally operating within Apple's closed ecosystem. That ecosystem for the F-35 is a US-managed digital network, originally called Alice and now succeeded by Odin. This is a cloud-based logistics system hosted on US servers. What this actually transfers is the authority over mission data, logistics, and critical software upgrades to American-controlled networks. The risk, as flagged by aviation analysts, is stark. In the event of a severe political or trade dispute, the United States could, in theory, lock out an ally from this network, effectively grounding Canada's entire air force. The ultimate off switch would not be in Ottawa. In stark contrast, the Gripen offers a different philosophy. It's the equivalent of a high-end open source PC. You have full root access. You control the software. You can modify the hardware, and you own the data. This is a sovereign platform designed to give a country complete authority over its own defense infrastructure. Brazil, for instance, didn't just buy the Gripen. Their choice included domestic production and full technology transfer, empowering their own aerospace sector. So the choice was never truly F-35 versus Gripen. It was a choice between two fundamentally different models of power: the unparalleled capability that comes from deep integration into the world's most powerful military ecosystem, versus the strategic autonomy that comes from retaining absolute control. And on paper, the sovereign option seems compelling, a clear path to reinforcing our own agency. However, choosing to step away from that deeply integrated ecosystem isn't a free move on the geopolitical chessboard. It carries a subtle but deeply significant political cost, particularly with the one ally whose security umbrella we have relied upon for generations. So, what is the price of that strategic independence? That price isn't found in public sanctions or angry headlines. For a long time, it existed only in the quiet, closed-door conversations between allies, where, as insiders have noted, the underlying message remained unmistakable. Washington's primary concern, conveyed through these non-public channels, was that Canada choosing a non-American platform like the Gripen could disrupt the seamless defense cooperation that underpins NORAD. Beneath the surface, however, the real tension for the United States lies in the power of precedent. If a core partner, a member of the Five Eyes and the co-founder of NORAD, were to deliberately choose a sovereign platform over the integrated American one, it sends a powerful signal. It tells other key allies, nations like Germany, Japan, or South Korea who are also weighing their options, that such a path is viable. This threatens to fragment the technologically cohesive F-35-centric alliance network that the Pentagon has spent decades and billions of dollars building. For a time, this pressure remained behind the scenes. Then, the subtext became text. In an interview with CBC News, then U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, stated on the record that if Canada did not move forward with purchasing F-35's, quote, NORAD would have to be altered. With the U.S. potentially flying more of its own jets into Canadian airspace to fill the perceived capability gaps. That single statement crystallized the stakes, confirming this was never just a procurement decision, but a negotiation over strategic alignment itself. However, to see this choice solely through the lens of external pressure is to miss half the equation. An equally powerful logic is pushing from within, a logic written not in diplomatic cables, but into the very map of Canada itself. That map dictates a reality few other nations on Earth must confront. Canada is responsible for defending one of the largest and most unforgiving airspaces on the planet. A vast territory stretching over the high Arctic, defined not by cities and infrastructure, but by extreme weather, immense distances, and a profound lack of established support. It's for precisely this environment that an alternative like the Gripen was conceived. Born from Sweden's own Cold War strategy of national survival against a superpower, its entire design philosophy prioritizes operational resilience over hangar-bound complexity. As analysts have noted, its operating concept is built around the ability to use short, semi-prepared runways with small, mobile maintenance teams. The goal is survivability through dispersal and rapid turnarounds. Let's ground this in a concrete scenario. Imagine a strategic bomber is detected on a vector over Ellesmere Island. Simultaneously, the main forward operating base is completely weathered in by a blizzard, a common reality. For an F-35, a platform that functions as the tip of a spear for a vast, data-intensive support system, this is a major problem. It's an exquisite instrument tethered to its equally exquisite infrastructure. The Gripen, however, answers to a different strategic calculus. It was designed with the expectation that its main bases would be destroyed in the first hours of a conflict. It can be refueled and rearmed by a small crew on a cleared, reinforced stretch of the Dempster Highway and be back in the air in minutes. That isn't simply a technical feature. It's a fundamentally different philosophy of air power, one rooted in resilience. What this reveals is the core trade-off. The F-35 reflects a model optimized for sophisticated main operating bases. The Gripen is optimized for survivability in austere forward locations. The question for Canada, then, is not which aircraft is more technologically advanced. The real tension lies in which philosophy better aligns with the unforgiving reality of defending our own northern sovereignty. However, the argument for this alternative philosophy is not confined to the challenges of the vast, empty north. Its deepest implications are felt much closer to home in the populated south, because beneath the surface of this military procurement lies a fundamental and perhaps more consequential question about our national industrial destiny. And that national destiny is measured in two very different currencies, dollars spent and value created. This is the economic calculus at the heart of the fighter jet decision, and it presents two fundamentally divergent paths for Canada's future. First, consider the path of the F-35. The numbers alone tell a story of escalating commitment. Initial lifetime cost projections sat around $19 billion. As reported by sources like CBC News, that figure has now climbed to over $27 billion, with some estimates reaching as high as $30 billion. Beneath the surface, this isn't just budget creep. It represents a massive long-term expenditure, a gravitational force pulling funds from other areas of national defense for decades, simply to pay the cost of entry and sustainment in the world's most advanced aerospace club. On the other side of the ledger, the Saab Gripen proposal is structured not as a simple transaction, but as an industrial strategy. It's an offer explicitly designed to align with Canada's own economic goals. The proposal includes a concrete promise, also covered by CBC News, to create up to 12,600 Canadian jobs through a partnership with domestic firms like Bombardier. The core of this offer is full technology transfer, giving Canada the intellectual property and the capacity for local manufacturing and support. This is where the choice transcends a simple comparison of price tags and becomes a question of economic sovereignty. Is it wiser to spend billions on a superior but foreign-controlled system where we are primarily a client? Or is it better to make a comparable investment in a way that deliberately builds our own industrial base, retains sovereign control over the technology, and ensures these massive security expenditures deliver a direct, long-term economic dividend? This is the very principle government leaders like Industry Minister Melanie Joly have emphasized. This vision of a revitalized domestic industry is compelling, but even these industrial benefits, the jobs and the transferred technology, are a rounding error compared to the ultimate prize being contested. This decision isn't truly about the next 20 years of industrial returns. It's about the next 50 years of Canada's strategic posture on the world stage. And the choice will determine whether Canada remains a client, consuming security within a system designed by others, or becomes a co-architect of its own strategic future. So the choice sharpens into focus. Client or co-architect? This isn't merely a rhetorical framing. It defines two fundamentally different futures for Canada, and the true impact of this decision will be felt not in years, but in decades. This is the long game. The real tension lies in whether Canada will accept a role as a perpetual junior partner within a U.S.-centric defense ecosystem, or if it will secure the position of a co-shaper of future combat systems. To understand this, let's use an analogy. The F-35 program is like renting a penthouse in a secure, full-service luxury building. You have access to world-class amenities and the system works, but you don't own the blueprints. You can't change the wiring. Your access is ultimately governed by the landlord. The Saab proposal, in contrast, is like being sold a plot of land and handed the architectural plans, the tools, and the training to build your own estate. You own it. And what this actually transfers is the sovereign right to modify, expand, and innovate on that foundation. Beneath the surface, this is precisely what Saab's offer of full technology, transfer, and source code access enables. It's a mechanism designed to catalyze a domestic aerospace cluster, fostering Canadian intellectual property. It's a direct contrast to the F-35's build-to-print model, which provides work but confers no design authority. This isn't about just building one jet. It's about gaining the expertise to be a credible partner in developing what comes next. Saab has explicitly invited Canada to partner on its Future Combat Aviation concept, a program for next-generation fighters and autonomous systems. It is an offer of a seat at the design table. So let's paint two pictures of the Royal Canadian Air Force in 2045. In one future, the RCAF is a reliable operator of an upgraded F-35 fleet. But every critical software update, every new threat library is dependent on a patch from Lockheed Martin, prioritized in Fort Worth, Texas. In the other, 2045 Canada is a key partner in a global combat systems consortium. Canadian firms, having mastered the Gripen's architecture, are now exporting their own AI-driven autonomous systems, IP developed and owned in Canada. We are co-shaping the future, not just waiting to purchase it. This is path dependency. The choice today locks in Canada's strategic agency and bargaining power for the next 50 years. It's a powerful sovereign vision, to be a co-shaper, not a junior partner. But what if that entire premise is a dangerous illusion? What if, in the split-second networked reality of a modern air battle, the very choice we make for long-term strategic autonomy results in a crippling, immediate loss of operational autonomy? That crippling loss of operational autonomy has a name. It is the interoperability paradox, and it represents the harsh, practical reality that must temper the sovereign vision we just explored beneath the surface of any modern conflict, and especially within the architecture of NORAD, lies a digital ecosystem. This is a hyper-connected, data-fused environment overwhelmingly dominated by American systems and increasingly by the F-35 itself. To be effective here is not simply a function of your aircraft's performance, it's about the speed and fluency with which it speaks the network's native language. And this is where the issue lies. While the Gripen is fully NATO compatible, introducing a different aircraft into this tightly woven network creates what military planners call friction. Let's translate that from jargon into reality. Imagine a Canadian pilot in a Gripen over the high Arctic. Her own world-class sensors detect a potential threat. In an ideal, seamless network, that data is instantly shared, validated, and acted upon by the entire allied force. But friction means the process of sharing secure, real-time targeting data between her Gripen and the American F-35's leading the mission is not as fluid as it is between two F-35's. It requires a translation, a pass through a gateway that introduces a delay. It might only be seconds, but in those seconds, her influence over the engagement, what planners call the kill chain, is reduced. The very independence Canada sought is eroded by a practical need for American workarounds in the decisive moment. This is not a theoretical concern. A reportedly leaked 2021 RCAF evaluation, first brought to light by Radio Canada, was stark in its assessment. It scored the F-35 at 95% against Canada's requirements versus the Gripen at 33%. The largest identified gaps were precisely in networked operations and performance in a highly contested electronic environment. Moreover, as defense analysts writing in Samstam, the national interest have noted, the Gripen's small numbers within the alliance, combined with a structural American reluctance to deeply integrate sensitive Canada-US-only data links into a third-party airframe, creates practical limits on its integration that baseline NATO standards simply do not address. This leads directly to the core of the paradox and the real tension of this entire decision. Does owning the keys to your jet and its source code matter if you can't get real-time access to the integrated digital battlefield where the fight is actually happening? The choice for greater strategic autonomy in the long term could, in fact, result in less operational autonomy in the critical moment. So, we are left suspended between two truths. The first is that ultimate capability in a 21st century alliance appears to demand a deep and binding dependency. The second is that the pursuit of true sovereignty risks operational friction and a potential loss of influence. This brings us full circle, but we are no longer looking at a simple choice between two aircraft. We are now looking at the blueprint of a nation's strategic identity. And so, this blueprint leaves us not with a simple answer, but with a far more profound and sharpened question about what Canada prioritizes as a nation. Throughout this analysis, we've seen how a seemingly settled procurement decision spiraled into a much larger strategic crossroads. We examined the sovereignty gambit offered by Saab, weighed against the immense geopolitical gravity of our NORAD and NATO alliances. We mapped the unique demands of the Arctic against each platform. We considered the long-term industrial dream of domestic control versus the immediate reality of economic integration. And just as we grasped the interoperability paradox, we understood that beneath the surface, the real tension is how these choices define our future. The choice was never truly between a good and a bad aircraft. It has always been a fundamental trade-off between two competing, yet valid philosophies of national security. The first philosophy, embodied by the F-35, prioritizes seamless integration. It argues for achieving ultimate capability within the world's most powerful military ecosystem, accepting as a price a deep and binding technological dependency. The second philosophy, represented by the Gripen, prioritizes sovereign control. It champions strategic flexibility and the ability to define our own industrial destiny, accepting the inherent risks of operational friction and the geopolitical pressures that follow. This decision, therefore, is about defining Canada's strategic identity for the 21st century. It boils down to a fundamental trade-off, and this is where the question turns to you. Where do you stand? Is the unparalleled capability and integration of the F-35 worth the price of dependency? Or is the strategic autonomy offered by the Gripen a risk worth taking for Canada's future? Share your strategic calculus in the comments. Decisions like this define a nation. If you value analysis that connects the dots and gets beneath the surface of these critical questions, make sure to subscribe and join the conversation.